Hey everybody, my name is Alina Carter, and today we're going to be talking about preventing child abuse and neglect through what I'm going to be calling the Parental Prevention Program. So to get started, we're just going to give a little overview of some of the child abuse and neglect stats in Missouri, just so we kind of know what we're up against. So according to the Census Bureau, in 2016, Missouri had about just under 1.4 million children, or anyone who is under the age of 18. According to the Missouri Division of Social Services, in that same year, there were just over 6,300 children who were proven to have been abused or neglected. So I did the math, and that comes out to approximately 1 in every 220 kids. And those are just the cases that were reported. We know that tons of cases go unreported, whether there aren't enough facts or evidence to prove that something bad is actually happening. So these are just the cases that we absolutely know about. I also took the stats from the Missouri Division of Social Services on all of those 6,300 kids and made a graph just showing how many were victims of each type of abuse. The numbers add up to more than 6,300 because some kids were subjected to more than one type of abuse or neglect. Something else I think is really important to point out and talk about is the fatality rates from child abuse and neglect in Missouri. In 2016 alone, 36 kids died from abuse or neglect, and it was proven that that was the cause of their death. And I'm not sure how big everyone else's grade schools that they went to were, but for me, that would be like 2 full classes of kids being killed in 1 year. And I think that's a shocking statistic. If 2 classes of kids were shot and killed in a school, there would be public outcry and media coverage, but no one really pays attention to these 36 kids that got killed by abuse or neglect, which usually happens at the hands of parents or friends or someone that the child knows. Something else that's important to look at is the fact that 41.7% of these people that died, these kids that died, they were infants, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about why they were infants, and we're going to focus on that part. So I did some research on why 41% of the kids that are abused and neglected and die from that are infants. And I found a few different reasons. One is that they are still unable to defend themselves physically. They can't get out of the way, they can't run away, they can't fight back, anything like that. And they also can't speak out. They can't ask for help, they can't tell someone what's going on, they can't, they're not physically able to stick up for themselves yet. Also, infants are very physically delicate. If you grab a 7-year-old by the shoulders and shake them, that's still abusive and incorrect parenting, but it's not nearly as deadly for them as it would be for an infant. And the last reason is that having a baby causes big changes in someone's lifestyle. It can be very overwhelming and cause a lot of stress, stress that can sometimes build up and precipitate abuse or neglect. So the program I propose is called the Parental Preparation Program. What it would do is it would target new parents, soon-to-be parents rather, when they come in for their first ultrasound or for beginning prenatal care. It's a really good time to start because you still have months before the baby will be born. Medical professionals will be having some pretty consistent contact with them over the next few months. And it just really is a good time to start taking the time to prepare to have this baby, to start a family, and to make sure that you're ready as a parent so that you don't fall into those patterns of abuse or neglect. So we're going to talk about 3 parts of this program, and they are parenting classes, coping skills classes, and screenings for previous child abuse or neglect trauma. So the first part of this program would be parenting classes. When I did my beginning of the semester project, I learned that there weren't any parenting skills classes or parent support groups of any kind in the Joplin, Missouri area. And it follows that if there aren't any in my area, then there aren't any in other areas of the state as well. Being a parent is doubtlessly a very difficult task, but for those who have suffered from abuse or neglect in the past in their own childhoods, that just adds a whole other layer of complication. There was a study done in 2014 of mothers who were survivors of childhood sexual assault, and these 3 researchers, they asked them, what are you most worried about as a parent? And they said that they weren't sure that they could do it. They were worried about how would they be able to connect with their kid, how would they be able to take care of themselves and take care of their children's needs that they were going to have. They didn't want to fall back into that same generational cycle of abuse and neglect. So I think that a program of parental support, some parenting classes, a group of some kind would go a long way in providing a support network, providing people who can get together and share their concerns and their fears and their ideas and their hopes. I feel like that would really go a long way in helping to prevent abuse and neglect. The second part of the program would be a coping skills class. About 10 years ago, 3 researchers did a study and found that good coping skills were positively correlated or related to positive adjustment. So the more you were able to cope with the things that were difficult, the more positively you could adjust to things in your life. You could see things through a more positive lens. You were more optimistic about life. You could see the good in things. I personally think that this is a course that would be best done online. It's hard for people in more rural communities to commute to a different class, and while a parenting class is good for people to be able to interact with each other and get some ideas and see that they're not alone in these things, I feel like coping skills are something that are a little more personal and would be best done without having to lay bare more sensitive things in front of a large group of people. This wouldn't just be for people who had past trauma, but having a child causes a lot of anxiety. And in some people it causes depression, so I think good coping skills could help a lot with those things. The coping skills program I found online was called This Way Up. It's all online and it's completely free. It's a 2-month program if you do 1 lesson every week, and then you have access to the content for another 12 months afterwards so that you can go back and review the content and practice the skills and refresh your memory on some things. I think that would be an excellent thing for parents to do before the baby was born, because then they can kind of get to know what are their personal strengths and weaknesses when it comes to coping with stressful things. They can learn some new skills and they have some time to practice those skills. I don't think a lot of people know there are online resources like this available, so I think it would be really important for a program like this to recommend a coping skills program or to give them access to it. So the final piece of this program would be screenings. A child welfare service in New York started to screen mothers who were coming in requesting preventative services, things like counseling and parental classes and things like that to prevent child abuse and neglect from happening. And when they screened them, they found that the ones at a higher risk had a high degree of trauma in their past. So I think it would be important to add in a child abuse and neglect portion to the screenings that you get when you go to the doctor's office, because they ask about your smoking and your drinking and your sexual activity and your health history from your parents and different things like that. And I feel like that would be an appropriate place to include questions about your past and if you were abused as a child, because those things put you at a higher risk. So I think that when someone comes in for ultrasound or for prenatal care, when they're filling out those screenings, that they should add in a section for child abuse and neglect. It can help doctors to estimate risk of these parents for abusing their children, and if they are at a higher risk, then they can do some of those preventative things, offering services. And another part of a screening could be asking if they know about some of the services that are available. This is an example of a screening I found online for domestic violence. A lot of these questions are really great, but I would alter it to be more geared towards your past. You know, were you abused as a child? Did you feel safe in your home? Did you ever have to live with someone who wasn't your biological parent? Things like that. And then at the end where it says that, are there any problems you'd like help with today? Would you like to speak with a counselor today? Would you like us to send you more information about a topic? If so, which topic? Have you ever heard of Safe Haven? Do you know what safe havens are? Do you know what the local domestic violence shelters are in your community? Have you ever heard of WIC? Things like this. I think this could really help make people more aware of the services that there are that could help prevent child abuse and neglect by lessening stresses and giving a support system. And it would also help us to see how much of a risk these people are at so that we can help them get those preventative services beforehand so they never have to undergo the trial of continuing that cycle of generational abuse. So just to quickly sum up, I think that the best way to start combating childhood abuse and neglect, especially that among infants and the high mortality rate among infants from abuse, is to focus on helping soon-to-be parents prepare through things like teaching them parenting skills, you know, things about development of children, teaching them coping skills, how to handle their stress and anxiety, and by screening them for their risk factors for abusing children, and helping them to find things in their past that might need to be resolved. And I think that this would make excellent headway in trying to reduce the number of infants who die of abuse.